Good morning, everyone. I am back at it this morning on this mini medallion, and I have completed the scribbling and thread painting throughout this motif, and as you can see, you should have a little bit better visual of how that dense quilting echoes around the motif and makes it pop out. So now I'm going to be working on this basket weave, which is a background to this motif. And I wanted this motif to stand out behind the background. And so if you see my stencil work, I make sure that I take everything up to this densely quilted area so that when I'm finished, it will look like the flower motif is on top of the background. What's great about doing this dense quilting in the echoed areas that I did is that when I run up with my lines, I can actually touch the line, and if I accidentally go in just a smidgen, you won't notice the mistake. So it's a great way to give yourself a little wiggle room if you have a little accident or a little inaccurate. So I'm going to go through some stitching lines here so that you can see. Now, the stencil here shows 3 lines, a single line, 3 lines. And what that will look like is actually a double line in the basket, and then where the single line is, I'm actually going to do additional repetitive lines and try to keep them uniform. They don't necessarily have to be straight, so you don't have to be worried about doing any ruler work, because when it's finished, the background, you won't even notice it. But the more repetitive lines you have, to me, the more detail, the prettier background is going to be in compared to everything else. And when quilting, you also want to consider that when you do some dense quilting, you need to kind of have a uniformity in your quilting. If you don't, with spacing in your quilting, when you get to the edges of your quilt, you're going to have a lot of waves. So you can do dense quilting, but you also have to do some smaller type of designs and kind of increase to larger ones for the overall effect of the quilt and for everything to lay flat when you're done with it. So I'm going to go ahead and start, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to travel up this purl line here. I'm going to go straight across here, then up, then hit that registration mark on the stencil, travel just a little bit, then up. Now I'm going to go all the way across the top. Well, I made a mistake, so what do? We're going to pretend we didn't make the mistake. I need to come across here. Now we'll have to do some traveling, but nobody will know. It's white on white. Now we're going to go down, back up, across, and this will close off the top there. Now here, I'm running into the motif, and that's fine because I gave myself all kind of traveling space. So we're going to come across lengthwise, this way. I get to travel in that little area, come across, and there we go. Now the next part, I definitely want to, we're going to have some issues here. So this is a little bit tricky. So this is where you're just going to have to decide for yourself. where you want to travel and move, because this is going to be crucial in determining how that background's going to look behind. So we will have to do some traveling, but that's okay. And there we go. That's how we get out of that. So now down, up, travel along the string of pearls, across, and there we go. So here you should see a little bit of the basket weave. It's starting to lay down really nice, and once the registration marks are removed, you'll be able to tell some real definition in there. I haven't mentioned it before, but on this particular piece, I did choose to use friction pins. I know there's debate, controversy, and everyone has their own method of marking. This particular quilt is an heirloom quilt. It's not a show quilt. It's going to be put on a bed as a cover, as a bedspread. And so with all the fine detail work that I had to do, they just offer a finer line for me to work with to get the fine detail. And it's just easier to iron it off and be done with it. So that was my choice. I normally like to use the Crayola Ultra Clean Fine Point washable markers. They are fabulous, but again, for this piece, I chose this method because that's what was going to work for me. So, you know, whatever you mark with, that's your choice, and so that's my discussion on that. Because of all the different changes in design, I did use multiple colors. That gives me more of a visual of knowing where I need to stop, so that I don't, as you know, you kind of get into a zone when you're quilting, and the visual coloring just reminds me, hey, this is the area that you need to be quilting this way, so it helps minimize mistakes. So I'm going to quilt just a little bit more and see if we can get just a bit more done. So I'm going to travel, cut across, because that's kind of tying in there with the string of pearls. Another thing that I want to bring to your attention is the hand tensioning. You don't see me using my hands flat. I don't need that big sweeping motion to do anything. I need all my motion to be very controlled right in this area where the needle is quilting. And so the finger tensioning is really my fingertips, and I'm resting my arm gently on the edge of the quilting table. You don't want to put your full weight on there, because that will also cause drag, and that will hinder your wrist motion, believe it or not. And so you will see me, when I'm doing my delicate work, really up more on my fingertips, letting my fingertips manipulate that quilt. And that's why I have this huge quilt on a suspension frame system to lift the weight off the table so that there isn't drag, so that I can get this wonderful easy flow, make it simple for my fingertips to move the quilt instead of my entire hand, because it's very, very difficult to do this very delicate precision quilting with the flat palms of your hand. Another thing is, again, the speed of my machine. You do not see me quilting very fast. I'm being very meticulous and careful. Coming up to the edge, travel over. I do have it set right now on my machine, and I'm working on a Viking Platinum 16 sit-down long arm. I have it set at 18%. My normal go-to is 10% for very delicate areas like working on the lines on this floral motifs. I may go a little bit slower, but 10% is about it. 18, 20, and then I get up to maybe 24, 25. I've never gone any faster than that. I'm just, that going fast does not work for me at those speeds. I found that this works for me. So here, I'm going to put that little line in, because you want to make sure that it looks like you are going behind, everything's behind that motif. So travel. And here we go. Now, some of you may also be questioning why I am using a glide foot or a bowl foot. And the reason being is this quilt has a lot of cut work and lace work, Battenberg lace. And so this helps me be able to glide over those areas and not catch the edge of any of that delicate lace work. And so if you have that option, that might be something that you'd be interested in. And I knew I've run out of bobbin thread. My machine was sounding a little off. But it's an option that has been a game changer for me. And I have done less ruler work because I've learned with the hand tension more control so that I can do the straight line quilting without the rulers. I do have my ruler foot. I have used rulers in the past. But if you get a chance and your machine does come with this option for an accessory, this might be something that you're interested if you ever want to do any kind of quilting on vintage linens that have this delicate work. It's also great to work with on appliques, going over appliques that might have some rises or texture in the fabric that you're working with. So I'm going to go ahead. Hopefully you can see some of the basket weave work.